Taoiseach, Ireland is now the third country in Europe in terms of the number of European Works Councils that are based here, a requirement under EU law for major corporations to have councils for effectively consultation, discussion with their employees. And after Brexit, a huge number of companies have moved their European Works Councils to here. Therefore, millions, literally, of workers are affected by how EWCs are operated here. In recent weeks, we have seen big layoffs from tech multinationals. We've seen the danger that Ireland will become used as a Wild West with regards to workers' rights and as part of a race to the bottom affecting workers here, but also workers right across Europe. The European Commission has found that our legislation here in relation to European Works Councils, particularly in relation to disputes, does not live up to the EU directive, and they've sent a formal notice to that effect to the government. What is the government doing to ensure that our legislation does meet EU standards, particularly allowing for disputes to be taken by European Works Councils? There was a significant first case taken to the WRC last week, which highlighted many issues in relation to our legislation, the finding of the WRC. One conclusion was that there should be a code of practice in place on European Works Councils. Will the government commit to introducing such a code of conduct as exists in many other European countries? Another conclusion of the decision was that the chairperson of the EWC was effectively shouldered with half of the cost of training themselves, going against the whole basic principle, which is that it is the company that is to pay for training and other things to do with the EWC.
Once again, I want to thank deputies for their questions. Deputy Haughey raised the issue of Russian vessels that are operating off our coast. These vessels are in international waters rather than our territorial waters, so they are permitted to be there, but they are operating in our exclusive economic zone, which is of particular importance to us. They are being monitored both by the Navy and by Air Corps. And obviously we cooperate with our EU allies and have access to satellite information as well. As deputies will have pointed out, there are a lot of subsea telecommunication cables that run on the seabed in our exclusive economic zone. I know there is a concern that they could be interfered with if there's an escalation of hostilities between Europe and Russia. And that's particularly in the context of the damage to the Nord Stream pipelines. But it is just a concern at this stage. We've no evidence as yet of any hostile act. So it's a situation that has to be monitored carefully, but I think it's important that we don't escalate it ourselves because it's a concern that we have. We're monitoring the situation, but again, have no evidence yet of any hostile acts from the Russian forces or Russian vessels in relation to Ireland. In relation to the trade matters raised by Deputy MacDonald, I'm going to have to seek advice on what the implications of that European decision are for Ireland, and I'll certainly do that. I've read about it in the papers, but haven't seen anything formally in terms of a briefing as yet. When it comes to the Occupied Territories Bill, our view as a government is that trade is an exclusive EU competence, and any trade sanctions imposed on any country should be done at European level and not unilaterally by Ireland as a member state. Indeed, it may even be a violation of the treaties, and there was advice from a previous AG on that. The issue of the mandate of ISIF, the Irish Strategic Investment Fund, was also raised by deputies, and I know legislation has been passed to prevent ISIF from investing in fossil fuels, for example. I'm not sure if any legislation exists in terms of its remit with respect to other countries, but I'll have to check up with Minister McGrath on that. But I think that if we do make it part of its mandate, I don't think it would be right just to target any one country. You'd have to look at it in the round and make sure that if its mandate prevents it from investing in some countries or some parts of some countries, that we don't single out any particular country, that we look at things in the round and maybe have a list. But I don't know enough about the detail of his investments to comment any further, but I'll certainly let Minister McGrath know that it was raised here. In terms of the European Works Councils, received some briefings on that and had some correspondence with ICTU. My former role as Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment, things may have moved on a bit since then. The file is now being handled by Minister Richmond, so I let him know that it was raised here and asked him to come back to deputies by correspondence. And then in relation to Mr Phelan, who's being detained in Iran, very much aware of the case. I know the Department of Foreign Affairs is working on it, doing all that we can to ensure that man is released as soon as possible. Know that he's in poor health and very concerned about that. But again, Iran, as deputies will know, is not the friendliest regime to Ireland at the moment and vice versa. But we are doing anything we can, and we really hope that they'll see this as a humanitarian issue and set aside politics in the interests of a man who is very sick and needs to get home to his family.